Everybody, or afternoon UK time. I guess it's still morning on the East Coast. And today I'm here with Ed Beaurain. So Ed and I are going to talk today about how he has created positive and productive teams. I first met Ed at the Tableau Conference in 2016 and found him to be like really, really kind and infectious and just an overall really nice person. So I wanted to go ahead and have this chat with Ed so you can learn a bit more about him and hopefully take away from some of his wisdom that he's done building his teams over the year. So Ed, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for the very nice introduction. And I was telling you, I was pretty excited when I went to that Tableau conference because obviously yourself, Andy, and just a celebrity within the data community. So I don't know if I asked for an autograph or not, but I definitely asked for a photo. But yeah, I've had the pleasure of from a career perspective, I've been with Tableau for 8 years. Hello. I don't know. Am I supposed to interact back with like chats and those things?
Feel free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. This is exciting. I've been with Tableau for 8 years, and I joined the team. I was the first manager hired out of DC. Had an opportunity to build that office up to about 250 folks, and obviously, pandemic, got acquired by Salesforce. Now 8 years within the company, and couldn't be more excited about what we're building and the things I'm learning. Hello, D. I had the opportunity to hire Dima, who's an absolute rock star, who's now over at Amazon. So yeah, it's been an absolute blast. Tons of learning, and couldn't be more excited.
Yeah. So what was it like kind of building that team from basically nothing, right? So you were the first employee in Washington, and like, how did that go? How did you kind of like, that seems like it'd be like incredibly daunting.
Yeah, it didn't go well. I mean, it did go well. I mean, the way I think about it is when you go back and you look at your toughest times as a team, as a leadership team, it's normally what makes you incredibly strong in the future. So in the moment, it sucked. A big part of it was kind of Seattle was the headquarter. Obviously, we had tons of support from the Seattle-based team, but everyone was new in DC. And a lot of us were actually new to the data space. I was at Nestle before this, selling Hot Pockets and Lean Pockets and all the great frozen food that, I used to have in college. And then moving over to kind of this role in analytics and being able to talk about the differences of, Tableau server and all the different, all of the infrastructure that makes up the world that creates rows and columns of information. And we really just relied on each other. It was survival, but at the same time, it made us really strong. And we were able to build an office that was, I think, an office to contend with across Tableau once we got through, I wouldn't say rough patch, the patch of intense learning and collaboration.
Great. So, I mentioned how we met at TC16. It felt like, when I first met you, I was like, have I known this guy for a really long time? And I think it's just the way that you're really, really engaging with people. And I'm jealous of that, or, I'd like to learn how to be able to do that myself. But every TC since then, you've made a point to kind of find myself, find Eva, find some of the other community people to say hi. Why do you do that?
I mean, I think because I'm genuinely excited to see you all on an annual basis. I think at some point I'm going to get in shape enough to do the morning run, or not have as late of a night the night before to do the morning run. That's going to be my next goal here for the TC. Yeah. No, I'm just like genuinely grateful. I think so many members of the Tableau team, past, present, and future, appreciate that a fundamental reason for this company's success has been its community. And it's the biggest differentiator that we have is that. And I think you have to really take care of the community, show gratitude towards, and it's also just a fun group of individuals, right? Like going out data night out and catching up with Steve Wexler, over a drink and his perspective on things. And then getting all of you and having my team participate or look at Makeover Monday or participate in the community. They're then accelerating their knowledge of what this platform can do, which makes them better salespeople, because all we really need to do is introduce any prospect or customer to the community. And if they invest in it, like everyone else, it kind of takes a life of its own. Yeah. And I think that's what's made this company so special.
Oh, that's great. Do you think I should start Makeover Monday again?
I don't know how much time that it takes to do all the things behind Makeover Monday. I feel like you're like the Hall of Famer. So I think like you can become on the board of directors of Makeover Monday and let some other folks kind of handle the day to day. But I think it's such a cool concept to say, the best visualization is a unicorn. We don't know. It comes down to the audience, and there's so many different ways to interpret this information. And I think it's really, really powerful. So, and I know there's different variations of it out there, but I leave that up to you in terms of the time constraints.
Yeah. It's a tough one because I really loved doing it, but it would take Eva and I don't know, at least 4 or 5 hours each a week. So I was thinking of maybe bringing it back in like a time boxed fashion. So for example, getting the data sets ready can be difficult, but that's an easy thing to manage. So I could, everybody, I've heard from a lot of people, they like watching me build things. So I could easily just, do the kind of YouTube live stream sort of things. And then one of the things that's took the most time was kind of the Viz review stuff that Eva had the idea for doing. And so I might just not do that part, but I know people get a lot of feedback from it, but it helps people build a portfolio. So that's why, why I'm thinking about it. But I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe one of the prizes if someone wins Iron Viz is they get to kind of run the background of Makeover Monday for the next year. Maybe that,
It's hard because it's part of the brand for Eva and I, and giving that to somebody else could potentially hurt that brand.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm not actually willing to give up that kind of control over the project. So
it's good to know.
It's my baby, right? So, and I don't want that getting ruined. But anyway, as I sidetrack us a bit, well, we were talking about community, and I'm sure you introduce your customers to those sorts of things because it helps people develop their skills. So,
absolutely.
But okay, great. So on your team now, so you have, I think you said you have a couple hundred people on your current team. Is that right?
On my current team, I have 80 individuals.
That's right. You're saying 250 from when you started that office there. Yeah. So what are your key responsibilities? Because you don't actually sell stuff, right? You let other people sell stuff?
Everyone's always selling, right? So we're always kind of selling our idea. But the official interaction between customer and rep is not me. So I lead our ECS business. ECS is kind of a concept that came out of the Salesforce team where we own the sub 50K opportunities. So opportunities that are less than $50,000 for all of our enterprise accounts. So it's kind of a nice divide and conquer between us and the strategic AEs and those teams. And my team.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. What does ECS stand for?
Enterprise Corporate Sales Team.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully that's right, since I run that team, but I believe that is what it stands for. I just call it ECS. And it's cool because it's an opportunity for these reps, to work with, some of our biggest and most complicated customers. It's an opportunity to learn from our strategic AE population, but it's also an opportunity to kind of run sales cycles, a lot of departmental use cases and those things. So they've been using a lot around kind of the accelerators that are being developed. I know the Information Lab just put out a new accelerator. So how do we sell these use cases more effectively that people can get kind of faster time to money? Granted, it's a little bit different than the blank canvas. I was watching Christian Chabot's GSKO 2016 video yesterday, and it's like, obviously, like, it's evolved, but like, I think you got to start with this, and then they'll be confident enough to get to that blank canvas to paint their own ideas and to get on Makeover Monday. But it's kind of a way for us to get more folks in the door and building that team. And I have my team based in DC, Austin, and Seattle. And it's been really interesting this year in terms of a flex environment. We have folks come in the office on Wednesdays, and I don't like force you to come in. If you feel like you're more productive at home, that's fine. But really try to ensure that when people go into the office, it is a valuable experience for them. So a lot of, a team meeting or kind of group share. And yesterday we were in DC. It was the first time where there was just truly like a buzz like it felt before. But I'm also very happy to be in my basement this morning and having this call with my cup of coffee. So it's just interesting, this new opportunity we have moving forward of like what this flex environment can look like. And I think that's been a big area for me to kind of learn and grow. And with Slack being a product, right next to Tableau within the C360, we're learning from the best when it comes to the future of work. And I've been excited, just learning about that as well. Yeah.
So, since your team is kind of dispersed all around the US, how do you communicate with your team? Like, what's worked best? What could you improve? Kind of talk to me a bit about how your team handles communication.
I think communication and is just, it's such a big problem to solve for companies because everyone's kind of trying to communicate to the salespeople. But a salesperson has about a 10% window in their brain to consume the things that aren't customer oriented. Not that like all of us have the ability to consume it, but when you're getting like marketing collateral and all these different things. So what I try to do is prioritize and communicate what I believe are the priorities for them to focus on, and work really closely with the leadership team that they are aligned on that message, and then they customize that message down to their team. So if we can distill the week down to kind of 3 main overall points that are oriented towards making them either more successful or giving them information that they need, we do it within Slack. So I'm a huge, obviously, Salesforce owns Slack, but it's been an absolute transformational, headquarter for me. I truly treat it like my digital HQ. So they're using that channel to ask questions to each other, to control F and find, a repository of data management use cases, advanced management use cases, or systems problems that they're working through. So trying to make it really self-sufficient. And the teams, what's nice is the teams aren't necessarily like, it's a team in DC, it's a team in Austin, it's a team in Seattle. All of the teams are dispersed amongst the 3 hubs. So when they go into their hub, they're actually collaborating with people outside of their teams. So I get multiple levels of collaboration, one through Slack, one through the office, and one through the team. And I think the best practice sharing has really taken a lot of work off of my plate, because at the end of the day, the best person who can answer your question is someone who's in a similar role, who's had a similar experience. Most likely not me. I'm here to see what the problems are and try to solve them as I develop themes and priorities.
Yeah, great. So I think I'm going to skip my next question. And for those of you that are on the live stream, I sent Ed a list of about like 40 questions. So I'm going to skip through them here. So a good leader will work to facilitate a team environment where sharing ideas and working collaboratively is encouraged.
Yeah.
How do you know if you're being an effective leader?
You got to ask, and you got to ask specifically what you could do better. I think a lot of people go in and say, how was that? That was good, right? Like they're not really like pointing for like, hey, we just went through this experience. What are 2 things that I can do better to remove barriers so that you can be a more productive seller? So I think specificity is really important. One way also is we have a survey that we do on an annual basis called the Great Insight Survey. And it's a series of questions that then buckets you in different areas. And part of our V2 Mom, which is how we kind of, plan for the year, a lot of that is built into the V2 Mom of measurements around psychological safety, around like what I want to do is build a team where I think psychological safety is probably like the number one thing, because if people feel able to ask their questions, then they've just unlocked a new level of support from 79 other people, 80 other people within the organization. So I think that's the pulse check I get. Obviously, it's this idea of radical candor of just, hey, leaders, tell me, I'll tell you. I don't think you're bad. I don't think you're good. It is what it is. Like, it's like, there's no judgment in what we're saying. We got to work more closely and more, effectively through this. I actually had a conversation with one of my managers last night where I said, I want to try an experiment with you. I want to coach you and not think about what I have to say. Like, I just want to be able to tell you, like, this is what I'm thinking, but for you to be able to come back to me and say like, hey, when you said this thing, I felt judgment or whatever, but just kind of remove that and then just say, okay, how do we go ahead and move forward and get better? The more you can create that environment and it's going in both directions, I think you create an environment where people care, where you feel like you can ask for help, and you have kind of a collaborative system to go ahead and overcome barriers. So I see it as like a real flexible, almost like a feeling than I do like, this is the hard and fast thing that I do. You just kind of come into the team and you're like, oh, everyone's kind of helping each other. And like, this is a little bit okay. Like, but I need to invest in it too, right? Because like it's almost like the community. You and Eva, like you can't just do makeover. Like it's the whole community coming together and owning parts of it. And I think that really creates kind of something that I would consider to be thriving. Yeah. And you can really use Slack in a powerful way to go ahead and do that at scale.
What's been a piece of feedback you've gotten recently that kind of took you by surprise?
I would say like a positive piece of feedback that took me by surprise was we were dealing with some issues internally, and I provided an honest answer that I didn't think they would want to hear. But their response was thank you. It was kind of like, thank you for just telling us how it is. And I think if I were a leader, in a previous role early on, I kept telling people what I wanted them to be motivated by, but it
Right.
was essentially out of my control in terms of what that outcome would be. Like I thought I
Mm.
could maybe make that outcome happen, and if we did it, it would be great and everyone would feel great. But like I got to just communicate, like, here's the things that I'm doing. Here are the things
Mm.
that are out of my control. This is most likely what's going to happen. Here are the things that we can do to change the outcome of these things.
Yeah.
But what you're looking for is most likely not going to be an outcome of that. Cool. And like, I think there's a lot of comfort in just feeling like I'm being told the current person's reality, and I'm very interested in kind of the problem for solving that. So I think that would
Okay.
be a really interesting learning. I think the feedback I get a lot is I'm someone who likes to motivate, who likes to kind of get people fired up and do those things, but there's like a lack of structure to that. So it can be
Mhm.
seen as kind of overwhelming. So how do
Yeah.
I make, enthusiasm or wins or best practices like this share for someone who's just stepping in? They're like, where's the structure of this? Like,
Right.
I'm a little bit overwhelmed, and you can't just jump into a busy subway system and just figure out where you're going. Like you got to kind of get in that flow. I think that's an area that we're trying to work on, and we have a lot of our reps who are trying to build out kind of an infrastructure to the best practice sharing,
Mhm.
which it requires, again, everyone to participate for it to work. But I think we're getting everyone to participate, and we're going to see if it's going to work.
Yeah. So I imagine that honesty that you're giving to your employees is building up a lot of trust as well.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially on the stuff that's not going well. Like I think that's the biggest thing is, and it's just so easy to be honest, right? It's
Yeah.
just like the easiest
Yeah.
thing in the world. And it's just like, here's the thing. And honest, sometimes it's like, and I don't know how to solve this, but it impacts you.
Yeah.
So can
Yeah.
you like as I talk to you about the problem that I'm trying to solve, and the goal of that problem is to solve your situation, how do you think you can better communicate the problem to me that puts me in a better position to solve it with the folks
Mhm.
that are part of this organization? Like,
Okay.
I think what really coaching my people to not just come up with a problem and just say, hey, this is an issue, but like, hey, this is an issue, and here's how I think it could incrementally improve.
Mhm.
And then we have the people from a leadership standpoint who aren't in the trenches, who now have a better understanding of how to solve that problem. And I think that
Right.
honesty and that trust means we solve problems more quickly.
Okay. One more question about kind of your background and your yeah, kind of what we're talking about here. So you have the feedback process for your employees, right? You have these team meetings, all these things that you all communicate with each other. But when you need help, how do you get it?
Um, when I need help, I would say I feel very comfortable asking my cross-functional teammates for their perspective. So people that are
Mhm.
outside of kind of maybe a sales leadership role, but at the same time are supportive of the team. They just have a perspective that's just different and super
Mhm.
valuable. And they normally deal with more constraints in solving problems. So they have to be a little bit more efficient in kind of like how they think about solving those things. Obviously, my leadership team and outside of work, I have a Better Up coach. So Salesforce provides Better Up,
Okay.
which is kind of almost like it's a little bit therapy / coaching, but I meet with my Better Up coach for every week for 45 minutes to go into deep conversations, whether it's about, a parent of 2 young boys under 3 and like how I'm falling
Yeah.
apart at the seams, or it's a conversation about, hey, I really want to go ahead and build kind of a better structure, but here's how my brain works. Can we work on that? So you get
Right.
that piece as well, which is great. And then obviously, just mentors and those things. But I
Yeah.
try to limit the things that I'm trying to kind of solve for on like some big meteor subjects, and then see if
Yeah.
we can kind of go round table on those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So let's switch over to talk about positive teams.
Yeah.
What are some of the traits of a positive team?
So I think the traits of it's funny. I was watching Hard Knocks yesterday, which is an HBO documentary, kind of goes
Yeah.
behind the scenes. You probably, I
With
think
the
you're an Eagles
Detroit
fan,
Lions
right?
this year, right?
Yeah, with the
Yeah.
Lions. And I watched Drive to Survive. I was actually talking to 2 salespeople, Caleb and Michael, yesterday about we're talking about kind of Drive to Survive. And when I talk about kind of these teams, obviously it goes to all of those factors, right? The coaching staff, the players, the environment. So there's a lot of nuances in terms of building these teams. It comes down at the end of the day to hiring great people. I just saw Sheridan post, who's a rock star that we just hired.
You paid her to write
No,
that. Right?
no, I didn't. But it's I love it. I think you hire people that are coachable, and hiring for coachability is really hard.
Yeah.
That are collaborative, that that believe like the success of the team will drive their own success. So it's like a very
Right.
healthy competitive atmosphere where, I go back to kind of the hard knocks piece, like the coach doing the up downs with the team, the entire team, like the head coach, like, and just pushing
Right.
himself and just getting in the trenches and doing those things like this kind of all in it together, people who are curious. So when we meet with our customers, like I think the world, and Dima's on this, and Dima's a great example where like, okay, Dima's in sales, but she's not necessarily like a salesperson. She's about adding value in a consultative manner about the technology and the problems that they're going to solve. Like, I think that's a more important trait in salespeople moving forward because the systems allow you to be persistent. You have outreach or HVS that allows you to kind of follow up. It's really around being curious around the technology. So I do think we actually took away the demo portion of our interview. And I think I
I
want
was
to kind
just
of
about to ask
reintroduce
that.
that
Yeah.
back. Yeah. I want to bring, it's interesting because it's like, I want to bring that back. Is it critical for them to do their job as a salesperson? No, but like going through Tableau for the first time, I remember going through it for my bronze demo, and like I got caught up so much in it, and it was like a really like I remember Daisy DePaul. I don't know if you remember the name,
Oh yeah.
but she was
Yeah.
a leader early on. She was like, that is the worst demo I've ever seen.
Oh
And it
God.
was so funny because I got so into the data and the data wasn't making any sense to me. So it's like I went on this journey with the product, but like I came out of this and I was like, holy smokes, like this is so much more powerful. And I was working at Nestle at the time. And the day that I got the offer was the first time I heard about Tableau at Nestle. They did a presentation of like BI
Okay.
tools. And I was like, I can either implement this thing here or join the DC office and kind of build this thing. And just like, I think the process of getting into the product motivated me to be part of the build because of how transformational it is. So I think
Yeah.
curiosity and getting into the product and diversity and just like, I've had some of my best success with people. Again, I look at Dima on this. She ran, I think, the nonprofit piece for an embassy in DC, teachers, commissions and those things. Once you educate someone on how that works, it's kind of like, oh, there's like tremendous upside. And I just have to be really consistent, understand metrics and add value. I think sometimes sales is gated because it's like, it's too risky in those things. Just be persistent, add value. There's tons of upside. And I think those teams, can be very successful.
Okay, great. I'm gonna put a link in here for a webinar that Eve and I did last week or the week before. 1 second.
What was it on?
How to give a good demo. So
it's evolved too. Like, what do you think? So I think what's interesting, Andy, is like the world that we're like accelerators, right? On the exchange, like it's pre-built, use case friendly, vertical friendly, departmental friendly. Like you can go in and say, okay, you're doing this thing within investment banking. I think, the information lab, I think it was around the financial markets, and then there's like this part of Tableau that we all kind of, you started with Coca-Cola and those things where it was truly like the build from scratch.
Yeah.
Like, what would your recommendation be to me on what I should do in the interview to make people like understand the value of this technology and be able to kind of communicate that in the role?
Well, I think that if you make somebody give a demo of Tableau in particular, I think it'll come through in the demo if they love the product or not. If they don't love the product, you shouldn't hire them. Because honestly, I think Tableau should be a pretty easy product to sell. It's so good. But I think one of the changes that Tableau is making, and you may dispute me on this, is that it's being sold more as a reporting tool now and not a data analysis tool. And at its heart, Tableau is still a data analysis tool, and that's what it's best at. So I get a bit sad, I guess, that it's sold like a reporting tool. So like, if somebody wants a reporting tool, use whatever you want. It doesn't have to be Tableau. Sure, Tableau can make things look cool and stuff, but if you just want reports, why use Tableau?
Yeah, it's not to dispute. I mean, your perspective of kind of like a Hall of Famer Zen master and those things are totally fair. I think what we need to find a way to do is, you're currently a viewer, but the real life is one of a creator, right? And just like, how do you kind of move up into those experiences? I think one thing, and I can chat with Nicola, who runs the accelerator program, is like there are environments within those accelerator demos to paint. Like there are kind of places where you can kind of, and how do we start to articulate that the value of Tableau is in the web editing functionality where you can ask that third and fourth question that's specific to you, where you're not relying on someone who doesn't know your business to go ahead and do that. And I think one way with our sellers that we can do is, very recently starting getting like access. Obviously, Alpo is our internal server. We eat our own dog food. Granted, Alpo is not the best dog food. I worked at Nestle before this, which owns Purina, which sold Alpo. Like I'd rather be Beneful or Purina One. But at the end of the day, we eat our own dog food, and like getting people into that environment, that sandbox environment, connecting to their view in Salesforce and doing the analysis. I think that's an area that we can teach them the discovery of this platform. But yeah, it's conflicting, but at the same time, the goal is to get Tableau in the hands of as many as people as possible. I think this is what they're willing, the masses are willing to consume. We get them into the community, and then we graduate them from, viewers to explorers to creators, but it's definitely going to be a journey.
Yeah. I saw something, it was either yesterday or the day before that you put on LinkedIn about Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, about the 7-second rule. I think it's called something like that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a bit? People probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but if you could just give a brief explanation of that, and then how do you use that with your team?
Yeah. I think I've watched this documentary 3 or 4 times now. So it's on HBO. It's between Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, and I have kids now, so I really don't spend time watching sports. But when I do spend time watching sports, it's around how people coach. It's like really like, again, Drive to Survive, Hard Knocks. And this is another example where it's behind the scenes. And you obviously have Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, who are two of, the winningest coaches in their specific areas in college and in the NFL. But they're also really, really good friends who share a very similar mindset to coaching their teams, which has shown to be proven to be very successful. So, and it's year over year, right? Even if you look at, I think Belichick last year, I think they made a run in the playoffs with kind of a rookie quarterback who was drafted out of Alabama, who had certain traits and kind of those things going through it. And the example of the 7-second rule was working with a sports psychologist. An average play in the sport is 7 seconds. And at the end of the day, you win more of those plays than you lose, you win the game. But sometimes we look at the scoreboard, right? And so in sales, you can just get overwhelmed by this quota that's sitting at the end of the 3rd month, or you can tackle it week by week. Here's the calls I got to make. Here's the pipeline I got to create. Here's the type of deals that need to be staged to then convert to opportunities. And you kind of just chunk this out 7 seconds at a time. Obviously, that piece is really important for the NFL, but it's just like they stick to the facts, where they just say like, okay, here are the plays that we need to run. There's not a lot of noise. There's this saying where it says, do your job. I think what I love about that saying is they create an immense amount of role clarity with what their job is. So they say, do your job, but they say, this is your job. And I think for us in kind of like at Tableau, what I'm trying to do is like create role clarity, because role clarity is actually a really hard thing to create, especially with these cross-functional matrix organizations in terms of supporting the customer, especially in a time of rapid change, whether it's attrition or hiring or those things, when you have new hires. I think that's when I look at that and I listen to kind of podcasts with them and watch that. It's like they have a way of recruiting great talent that's incredibly coachable. They get them bought into the system. The system plays at a higher level, so everyone plays at a higher level. And then they do this in increments that are totally doable wherever you go. I think that's what gets me really excited about that. Like the role I have now, leading a team of 80, which will expand, year over year, is you can create a 2 to 4 year program for folks that are early on in their career to make them top ICs, to make them top manager candidates, but with kind of a consistent flow of what that looks like. And I think that's kind of what we're building right now on the ECS side of the house for Tableau.
So, let's say that I'm a new salesperson coming into your team. The rest of your team already kind of has a good grasp of this concept, but I come from a traditional organization where it's all about your quarterly number. And there is that, you just got to focus on that number and that's it. How do you then integrate somebody like that into a team that works so differently?
I mean, I think it's so easy from a leadership standpoint to be like, that's the number, go do that number. Like it's and you're not doing that number and you're behind that number or whatever. It's like, like that's the fact, but like I'm behind that number because I'm struggling in XYZ areas or don't have leads or So I think it's always giving the benefit of the doubt to you hire people who are smart, who are hardworking. And by the way, they also get paid in a way that they don't really get paid well if they don't sell. Right. So like they're very motivated, so we don't have to talk about that with them. It's more so what's your process as you're looking at this quarterly goal and you look at kind of what you can do within the month. I always think taking smaller increments and executing on those smaller increments, it's less quantity, so you have higher quality. And if you can do that higher quality more often, it'll scale out to the larger quantity kind of later on because you get the systems in place. My dad always told me it takes 21 days to change a habit. And when you're a salesperson, you're 25, you're 26, you're 30 years old, whatever it is, like okay, you're carrying habits throughout your entire life.
Yeah.
So my expectation is incremental change, not 90-degree turns, right? Like you
Okay.
have to really make things small, and you just work on small wins. And the best thing that we can do is have conversations with the customer. How are they using our technology? How can we make them use it more effectively? And how can we get them to use more of the products like data management, advanced management, embedded? If they're all viewers, get them to explorers, get them to creators. But why would we want them to do that? And that's where you get into the product and understand truly the value of Tableau, which every person out there is a knowledge worker. Tableau just takes that knowledge worker's ability to go ahead and make decisions based on data, which hopefully is how we're all making decisions, and scale that out. Anyone who has internet, anyone who has a computer should have access to Tableau, right? Like I think that's a fact that we all agree with. How we do that, how we overcome, the usage of Excel. Like everyone has those things. So it's just a fun business to be in. And that's probably how I would coach someone who's new. But most importantly, I would pair them up with someone who's just ahead of them. Maybe, you're fresh.
Right.
Okay, who's 3 months into the role that came back from a similar background, because their story is going to be more relevant to them than me, who's been here for
Like
8 years.
mentor. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I guess that gives people leadership opportunities as well, even though it's a little increment of a leadership opportunity. It helps you see potential. And is that person showing signs as a really good mentor? Maybe that'll make them a good manager, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And people love to help. I think people really do love to help. I think it's a big part of, especially over the past, the great resignation in this fully remote environment. Like it's so easy to say goodbye to chase OTE when you don't have personal relationships with people on your team, right?
Yeah.
And I think as you build out this idea of community, I was out to dinner with my wife yesterday. Who actually works for Slack, which is funny. So she was in political journalism, and then she moved over to Slack. So we have a household where I'm here in the basement with Tableau. She's upstairs with Slack, and my neighbor actually works for MuleSoft. So we have kind of, we're building out the C360 in our own neighborhood. But this idea of Slack and those things, and and this not return to work, but just what the future looks like. And it's this idea of community, I think, is really important. And the community could be a community on, Salesforce does a great job with their ERG groups, where it could be Bold Force or Earth Force, or these really important communities where they give back to the community, like VTO. I think there's ways as leaders to invest in the community that if we're able to get to this outcome that we're looking to get to, which is to essentially grow the business, we invest in that experience. We do more VTO, we do more of those things. And I think what's been impressive with Salesforce versus my time at Tableau is I do think we are, because we're part of the company, more outspoken in terms of the impact that can be had out in the world, especially in kind of those core areas as well. And I think Tableau is going to be a critical part of that moving forward. And it's going to become more and more clear moving forward how analytics is ingrained in everything that you do. But just like we have to sell it to our customers, we also have to sell it to other sellers within the Salesforce ecosystem to kind of see that. And I'm really excited about kind of the progress there.
Yeah. Great. So to keep your teams positive, I imagine you have to kind of help them constantly improve their performance and their individual skills. What do you do to help your team members improve? Do you provide them training? Do they get a budget to go out and do kind of training they want? How do you help them improve?
I mean, I think it's like, I have a list of things that I need to improve as kind of a leader, and onboarding is one of them. I think onboarding it's even more complicated now because of the folks that, like, this in-office, out-of-office thing is really interesting. So I think for the folks that are on my team that are on this call, like Sheridan, I'd say, like, we have actually a big opportunity to improve in terms of the onboarding process. So right now, especially this ECS, in this first phase of growth, we hired 25 people in the first 2 quarters. So like a huge slew of folks. And, the feedback that and so I would say right now I'm in feedback mode. I'm like, okay, I'm getting feedback. I'm soliciting feedback on like what can be improved. You just experience this. If you go back to day one, what are the things that you learn? And interestingly enough, it is the product, right? It's like, I need to know about the product. I want to know about server versus cloud. I need to know about creators, explorers, viewers, data management, advanced management, and those things. So I think really taking that feedback, putting into play, and getting them to participate in kind of, is this relevant, is super helpful. And the other thing is just Slack, right? Of just like really encouraging people. I have 2 workflows that I just introduced in my Slack channel. One of them is ask a question that's kind of compartmentalized across different topics. As they're asking questions, what are the topics that keep coming up? Maybe it's systems is a big thing. Okay, like I can invest in that. So I think it's, how do you create the data points from your people and their countless interactions that say, this is where I need to invest in outside of what's available in the world. And we all know that there's so many assets that are available to answer your question, but that's not necessarily how people learn, by just
Yeah.
reading this document or watching this video. So I think that's what we're trying to figure out as well. I think what keeps the team positive is the idea that they're feeling this investment in their problems. I think that actually what makes people feel the most positive thing is they're heard. We're
Right.
explaining the business rationale with maybe why it is and why it won't change, or why it is and why we're going to go ahead and try and change it. And then we include them, if they're open to it, in the process of solving for it. It just makes everyone feel like, okay, we're all stakeholders in this outcome. And, at the end of the day, like, there's tons of room to improve. It's far from perfect. It's never going to be there. So how do we make incremental improvements? And I think that creates a really good environment.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to we have a feedback loop at the data school. So every cohort that goes through, halfway through the training, and then at the end of the training, somebody that's unbiased, not a teacher, goes in and gets feedback from them. So every time a cohort starts, they have a different curriculum than the one before. So no two groups have had the same curriculum, because we want it to be a constantly improving cycle. So it sounds like that's what you're doing with your onboarding as well, right? It's probably never the same twice.
I would say that would be a great next show for you, is even you with enablement leads in the business and those things. Is, I think onboarding is, it's one of those things that's really hard to do. So I think that's a great discussion, and that's an area that I definitely need help on. And I'm not saying like I don't have this and other parts of the company do. I just think we have to look at the onboarding experience in this new world, this hybrid world of people are used to being in touch and asking questions and doing those things. Like, well, shoot, like maybe that's not going to be the way that we do this thing. So what does it look like at scale? So I'd be super interested in just learning more there.
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. More content. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So switching on to kind of highly productive teams, what are the 2 or 3 main things that make a highly productive team, and how do you measure those?
I think a highly productive team is organized. I think organization is the skill of the future. A lot of sales, I mean, I feel like sometimes I'm a salesperson, okay? But I do feel like I'm more organized than my peers within the world of sales, at least historically, when I was kind of a frontline leader. I then moved into operations, and I was probably the least organized person versus that peer group. So it's always kind of like, how do you become more organized? Because that allows you to prioritize, take in communication, simplify it, synthesize it, and actually sustain the follow-up on it. So I think organization is just like, it's massively important, especially when you're getting so much information from so many different places, and you have to make a decision in the series of steps you're going to take moving forward that provides the best outcome to the customer. And I think that's really, really hard to do. I would say coachability. How open are people to being coached? Are they seeking that feedback? Are they enjoying the process of being coached? Or do they create a gate that makes it too difficult to provide feedback? And then at the end of the day, if you provide that gate, like, everyone's tired, so they're going to take the path of least resistance. So you're just not going to get coached. And that sucks for you. But at the same time, like, those people who are just like hungry for coaching and hungry for follow-up, I think is really, really important. And then, collaboration. I think someone who's willing to ask someone across the aisle for help, it's actually like a really, really, it's a sign of self-confidence, which I think everyone's kind of working on. You can build that. It's creating, obviously an environment where people feel psychologically safe to go ahead and ask those questions. But if you're coachable, if you're willing to ask people questions who probably have the answer, you can prioritize and organize yourself around doing that. And you're just kind of, the last thing I would say is you're kind of grateful for the experience, not for the outcome. So you're not like, I will feel happy when I deliver 130% of my number, but you're kind of, I'm going to be really not happy. That's the wrong thing, but like, I'm motivated by the learnings I'm having by going through this experience that are making me kind of better professionally in these areas. If you can have that mentality, the toughest of times, like I was talking about at the beginning of kind of Tableau and DC, become those things that give you the strength and put you in a position that you're going to differentiate yourself from your peers. So I can't really remember if that's like answered your question, but that would be my long trailing response. Yeah.
So let me go back to kind of, being organized. How do you keep yourself organized? Do you use tools? Like, I use Todoist a lot, and, notes on the Mac, and really simple things, Notion, for example. What do you use to keep yourself organized? Well, like, what are your processes?
Yeah, it's a huge area of opportunity, and it keeps evolving.
For everybody.
I know it is. Like, to me, my biggest area of opportunity is if I really So I have 2 boys now, and I would say before the kiddos, I wasn't able to disconnect. Like a little bit of work-life balance issues. Like if I had open time, I was going to work it. Now I physically can't.
Right.
A, because I want to spend time with them, and B, by the time they're in bed, I'm too tired to do work, which I think is a
Right.
really healthy thing. So
Yeah.
the good news is that like I become better at executing and prioritizing on things as I've evolved as a person, which means my to-do list is a little bit less. Like I feel like I can say no. I feel like it's not really like that's not mission. So I try to limit the things that go on the to-do list. And then for me, it's synergy across my different technologies. So I use my iPad when I go in the office. Obviously, we always have our phones. So just kind of like I have Slack and all those things across all of my devices. So I'm able to go ahead and follow up.
Yeah.
I really just use Slack. Like I stay organized within our channels. I save items. I go ahead and do delayed sends. Anything that's a to-do, I actually have like the to-do app and I'm able to do it.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is most of the to-dos that fall through the cracks are actually on the personal side of my life, not on the professional side of my life. Like I'm very good at getting the work stuff done.
Yeah.
So I really focus on the to-dos of just like, okay, like I got to go buy this thing or fix this light bulb, or I need to go ahead and book, doctor's appointments out, or I need to go ahead and do those things where I can really kind of obviously play my role within the household. I think that's where I really focus my energy and follow up because I'm still in a position where work, and I work with this on my Better Up coach, like there's still kind of this obsession with work and kind of the outcome there versus kind of, life. And what I try to tell my people, what I try to do myself is like, especially through the pandemic, like I think the American population and all my family's in Europe, and you've been in London for a bit. Like I do think we're a little obsessed with work, where it's like, how does work fit within life? And then how do you spend kind of more time doing those things and become more productive in work because of it? Yeah. And I think that also kind of helps as well.
I'd highly recommend to you a newsletter called The Daily Dad. It's fantastic.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. It's great.
Yeah, it's from the Daily Stoic. So it's the guy who does the Daily Stoic as well. So yeah, he does the Daily Dad, the Daily Stoic. I actually have all of his some of his books here. So that's where I kind of try to reflect on those.
Yeah, it's completely, it helped me change the way I think about being a dad, which is really interesting. Okay, so there's a question from somebody on the chat here, AM. I don't know what her name is. Are there some best practices before asking a question? Is there a time limit someone should set so once you hit that time limit, it's time to raise your hand? That is a great question. We run into that all the time when we're teaching. But I'll let you answer.
The best practice. So it's more of like, how do you elicit your audience?
How do you know when it's time to? How do you know when it's time to ask for help or to ask a question versus continuing to plug through it yourself? I think that's what they mean. I'm guessing. That's what they mean.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you're doing something and you're kind of like, I'm sure someone has done this more effectively before me, right? Like I think when we look at history and read history, it's like, okay, everything has been experienced before us. Just maybe it's like the topic is slightly different throughout that process. So I would say as you kind of go through that process and ask questions, it's just be open and willing to doing it early and often, but do your research ahead of time. Like what I would encourage folks to do, like on my ECS AMER Slack, which they use, is like Control F, see if it's been answered before, and then build on that question. Right? Like there's a beauty of like, there's a million questions that are the same, but are asked at different times. It doesn't necessarily build on each other. So again, we use Slack internally. Encourage you all to use Slack wherever you're at as well. See, we're always selling. But as you kind of go through that process, it's to build on certain things, is to go through the process and just to be very like, ask a question. If you don't get your answer, figure out where you can go ahead and get that answer. Like be relentless in your ability to go ahead and get questions that are answered that are important to you, and highlight why they're important to you. Like, why is your curiosity driving you in this area? And if you're able to get this question answered, there's probably about 10 other people that haven't experienced what you're about to experience. They're going to have the same question. You give it back. Then you're like, okay, how do we improve the process based on the complexity of it?
Yeah. I would say from my perspective, if I can type your question into Google and get the answer, then you haven't put in enough effort to try to answer it yourself. But also the only way to learn to ask good questions is by asking questions. Right. So you get better at asking questions, the more questions you ask. And it can be, especially if you're new, you feel like your question's dumb. I should know this already, but how are you expected to know those things if you're new at a company? Right. So
that's the part that, like, to me if I could unlock that for my new hires, to not have that fear of like, I don't think it's like I want to look dumb. It's like I don't want to bother other people with
Yeah.
something that is
Yeah.
like not complex compared. It's like, well, if that's the case, then those people can answer the question like that. And most likely they will feel good about being able to give back to you and answer those questions. So I think you just kind of remove that. And then when you're seeing people who aren't doing the work, that's when coaching comes in. And most likely, if they're not doing the work there, then it's probably showing up in other parts of their business as well. And by asking questions, well, we can identify that. And by identifying that, we can actually improve on kind of the root cause of the individual. So I think like airing a lot of these things out, again, allows you to be more coached to go ahead and solve for other parts of your business.
Yeah. We have, well, there's a couple ways that I think about that. First off, if somebody thinks your question is a dumb question, that's a problem for them, for being judgmental towards you. I'm sure they've had a question that's been dumb before too, but hopefully nobody said that to them. So if somebody says your question is dumb, then, don't worry about them anymore. You don't need them in your life. The other thing is we have a hashtag that we use internally called, it's something, now, of course, I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but it's something like hashtag, this is probably a daft question. But, and then their question is, it's like, I really should probably know this and I'm embarrassed to ask it. So I'm going to use this hashtag so everybody knows I'm embarrassed to ask it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's this kind of neat way to get people to know that, I think I should already know this, but I need some help. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard this one yesterday was, in the spirit of psychological safety, here's my question, right? So you're kind of letting people know like, hey, don't, but at the same time, there should be no judgment on a curious person who's looking to learn, but at the same time, who has done their research and trying to solve this, right? Where it's like, maybe as part of your question, it's like, I've kind of gone to these places and it's not giving me what I want. So like, how do I take it to the next level? I think in anything that you do, going to leadership, trying to do whatever, like do the work, state your question, and then get support.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned was hiring people that are coachable.
Yeah.
So use an interesting word there called coach. And the people that kind of run the training program at the data school, we're all called coaches. We're not called managers. And I think we do that intentionally so that people don't see us as a superior, I guess. We have a completely flat organization anyway. There's no hierarchy in the company at all. So that probably helps us. But you keep reusing that word coach because, for me, that means, I'm just here to help you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the way that you use it with your team?
I mean, I think what I heard kind of the term manager, which is like an official term, but you normally manage things, not people, right? So you lead people. I think when it comes to coachability, it's how willing are you able to get feedback from someone who has a vested interest in your success to get better, right? Or even in the coaching process, that person who's a coach can also get better because they need to get better at their overall feedback. So I think the mechanism of investing in someone to become a better version of themselves, in the concept of a team to achieve overall team goals, like I haven't seen a better concept that I can study. There's great coaches out there. You see great teams, great athletes. Serena Williams, for example, who's retiring, like just watch documentaries on her and the work that she's done and those things. I just think it's a term that you can use that everyone remembers a good coach. Like really, like everyone, and doesn't mean they were an easy coach. It means they were tough, they were honest, they were consistent. And I think that concept goes to the student and to the person who's the coach, and that coach has a coach as well. So I don't know. I just think I like your concept for the kind of the data school, kind of the head coach and those things, because when you run an organization, like it is a little bit head coach, assistant coaches for their different things. But at the end of the day, like we got to go ahead and win as a team. And I think that concept helps as well.
Okay. Stay motivated and productive, kind of pats on the back. Like a lot of people just want recognition that they're doing a good job. How do you go about?
And you might have hopped out. You might have were in and out for a second. So just like is the comment on how do you give kind of positive feedback?
Sorry.
So you mentioned this when we were in the you got new internet, so I'm going to take a shot at the question while kind of the internet goes back.
No, can you hear me?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit better.
Okay. So my question was, everybody likes to kind of have a pat on the back to know they're doing a good job. How do you go about recognizing people's accomplishments?
I would say specificity, right? Like, I think that's the biggest thing when you're giving, positive. It's like the specificity of why you're giving that, and kind of the idea of now how do we scale that out to other folks. And you're back now, so it's just a short time, so you're good to go. So I think that's kind of the thinking there is, great job. Okay, it's very different than like, hey, great job. Realize we didn't win that opportunity, but the fact that you competed with, Power BI the way that you did, and you did the research and you tried to go ahead and use these things, like, you should be really, proud of the work that you did, even if the customer made a decision that kind of, whatever, like, focus on what you can control, focus on the controllables. Like, I'm going to celebrate this massive deal that came in, but in the behind the scenes, like, they probably didn't do any work for it or whatever, because it just like, okay, like, that is something that as others see you put a spotlight on that versus a spotlight in other areas, they can just kind of think about kind of what's important to the individual. I coach on the behavior. I don't necessarily coach on the outcome. So like, what is the physical thing that this person is willing to do to get better, to invest resources, to better the team? Because if you celebrate that, everyone has control on that. Every single person can control their own behavior. And I think that's, again, an important thing to create a collaborative environment that's looking to get better every day.
Yeah. I guess it's easy to pat people on the back when they sell a big deal, right?
And you should celebrate that. But what you should celebrate is the behaviors that went into making that happen.
Right.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, we're all stewards of this account for a very short period of time.
Yeah. Okay. Just a couple more questions, and then we're running up on the hour here. So some of these are things I've written down, so I'm just going to read them if you don't mind. We all fail all the time, right? And that's typically when we learn the most, is when we screw up, and it's part of our job, right? If everybody does their job perfect, then they're probably not pushing themselves hard enough, I think. But it's also important for others to see you as a leader, that you fail as well, right? You make mistakes, you fail, you're not perfect. Do you tell your team when you fail, and does that help them do the same?
I mean, one of my favorite terms is fail early, fail often, and fail forward, right? So again, I think failure is an intense word, but I would say, examples where I didn't bring my best self to the team. My family had, I think 2 weeks back, we had kind of a bout of COVID in the household, and we went in and everyone was good, and we kind of worked through it. We got the antibodies now, so we're, thriving in the outside world for the next however months to go back into hiding. But I wasn't prepared for a meeting. And then I went 45 through the meeting, just rattling stuff off. Like, I was vibrating going into that. I didn't have the space to do it. And I just came back with the team. I said, that was not a good experience for anyone, especially all of you. Like, to be talked to for 45 minutes because I'm a little bit overwhelmed with my current personal situation. I think highlighting those things, it lightens the mood. We're all trying. We all have good intent. Like, no one here is trying to do a bad thing. We're all just trying to do what's best for the customer. But at the same time, we all have ego. And ego is an important part of how the human works, and just kind of making those things lighter and more coachable in the moment and how you get better. I think that's kind of what you try to do of, hey, I communicated this thing, it was incorrect, or I communicated this thing, this is the outcome I was looking for. Looking back at it, it wasn't the right thing. I think that reflection and that discussion, it just, again, it creates a space of psychological safety for everyone to be like, okay, like, how do we get better? This is okay. So I think that's a thing that we're constantly working on. But at the same time, like, I also have an ego. I also want to be right. I also am leading a large team and enjoy that. So it's just everything, the human behavior and what goes on between our two ears is like always incredibly complex, which makes it why all this is so much fun, yet so complicated. And I think you just continue to drive self-awareness amongst yourself and your people, and you're willing to have more honest conversations about kind of, okay, this is my experience, not my judgment, with the end outcome of just the customer investing more in Tableau from a professional standpoint. Like, that's the equation that we just need to go ahead and continue to kind of spend time on.
Last thing about productive teams. So productive teams are typically very flexible, and they can adjust to new situations really, really quickly. That must have been a pretty big challenge when Tableau was bought by Salesforce. How did you, plus your team, adapt to that?
Going through an acquisition is probably like one of the coolest experiences that you like. It's you only go through this so many times, like through so many times. But I mean, I think it's once you get acquired, just like you're an acquired company. Like this company paid
You
a
can't do anything
premium
about
for
it at that point, right?
No, but it's also like you also benefit from it, right? If you own
Mm.
shares in the company, you get a premium on what they paid for and those things. And I think what's really interesting as you kind of go through this is like, yes, there's this what Tableau was and what the Tableau, the product is now within Salesforce. And, I just spent time like yesterday. I said, I'm so grateful for the people who paved the path behind us. The Kelly Wrights, the Christian Chabots, Chris Stoltes, Pat Hanarans, and then there's the folks that have just, an Andrew Beers and the Francois that are still here. Like, at the end of the day, the mission has always been, we're going to help all people see and understand data. Mm-hmm. And the acquisition of Salesforce acquiring Tableau probably accelerated the outcome of that mission tenfold based on kind of the massive distribution org that's now a part of it. And if you focus on that and you don't focus on like, but this person was this leader and this is the way we used to do things and that, it's like, be flexible. Like Salesforce has incredible core values. They have an awesome opportunity to invest in, but it really takes time and everyone has a different process to go through that. Yeah. I think earlier on, just having more conversations about like, where are you at with this? How are you doing? How are you looking at it? I think because it happened and the pandemic happened, right? Two kind of intense things, obviously the pandemic being much more intense. It caused people to potentially make, decisions to move on, to do whatever. That's okay. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we're here to help people see and understand data. And we're chapter one of that. We're still in chapter one, right? In terms of the opportunity that's out there. So I think that's something that has kind of kept me positive. And anytime that I've struggled, I've, just talking to people. But at the same time, because work is a less intense part of my identity, it's more like, okay, I'm a dad. Like, does this job fit within my being able to be present as a father and do the things? Yeah, it does. Great. That works. And I love Tableau, and Salesforce is a really cool company and invest those things, but it's not like an obsession of like who I am because I work for this company. I think that's evolved too, most likely because I have, two young kids who just changed my perspective of kind of what's important. That doesn't mean I don't do a good job in my role. I just burn less calories on the thought of doing a good job.
Right. Okay. Last question. If young Ed were starting his career again today, what would you do differently?
I'd be less obsessed with like getting to a certain role with a certain title, right? I think early on you're like, I'm going to be this person. And like at the end of the day, that's kind of the 7-second rule, is just like, what are the experiences that you can invest in yourself early on that are highly, educational? You get into a company where you're focused maybe not necessarily on the product, but the leader, the manager that you would have and work for, like these foundational things that you could do, work in a company that has a robust training program and participate in those things. Like when you have more time early on, which you do, but you invested in going out, or you invested in being with friends or family, like everyone, there's complexity at kind of every level of life, but putting yourself in a position where you can really learn, because as you're younger and you learn a ton, it's kind of like investing in your 401k. It just compounds over time. I think that's what you do. You don't chase the OTE early. Like my dad would say, don't worry about that piece. Focus on putting yourself in environments where you feel like you're learning, you feel like you're growing, you feel balanced, you feel like you can scale. I think mental health is a really important thing. Like, is this an environment where I can be myself and do this moving forward, where I'm going to be able to scale with it?
Right.
And then just really just reflect and enjoy the process. And, like Dima, like put your thoughts out there on LinkedIn, ask questions, get involved in these things, like spending time in thoughtful discussions with people with different perspectives. Like that's the way that you just learn and get better.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you think of Sheridan's idea of you doing a TED Talk?
I mean, I think that'd be pretty official. I'll probably start off with a TEDx, but Sheridan, let's figure out
that's probably a TEDx. Yeah.
No, I mean, I got to figure out the theme and those things, but no, just grateful for this opportunity to connect with you and share these thoughts. And like, I don't have the answer to any of this, but I think if you create an environment where you lead with love instead of leading with fear, I think you can get the same outcomes even better outcomes that are going to last longer. So let's try out this experiment. And for anyone out there that's interested in participating in that journey with me, we'll be hiring and we'll be building this team. So we got a bunch of open roles across Tableau.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ed. And hopefully I see you at the next Tableau conference, which
absolutely.
I assume it's going to be in the spring. But so I'll look for you there.
Absolutely. I'll bring my running shoes this time.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.